Happy Friday, guys. Or whenever you're listening to this. Don't know if it'll be Friday, but
Yeah.
happy Friday, Jimmy. How you feeling this week?
Feeling great. Feeling fucking pumped.
Good. So something that I've wanted to talk about for a little.
Good.
I
Good.
mean, that's great.
It is. It's
Um,
been fun.
Something that's been kind of like a hot topic lately that I think we should talk about because we're in the CPG space. Lately, there has been a ton of conversation around the ingredients that are used in American foods.
Trash.
And um, potentially banning some.
Good.
A couple of months ago, there was a petition led by a woman who basically was going to Kellogg's and saying, you said a couple of years ago you were going to remove artificial dyes from your cereal like Fruit Loops. And here we are. This was in like October of this year. And there's still artificial dyes in your cereal. So she led a petition and then she like went to their headquarters and I think tried to actually talk to them.
She went to Congress too, right?
Yeah, she spoke like at Congress about it. Nothing ended up coming of it. Kellogg's was just kind of like brushing it off because, that's just clearly what they've been doing.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that happened. And then we also had RFK become a pretty prominent figure when speaking about like the health of Americans. And with Donald Trump getting elected, um, there's this expectation that RFK will have some kind of like position or at least
They
influence.
just they just named that they were going to nominate him to the head of Health and Human Services, which is the guy that oversees the FDA.
Okay,
So
which is kind of what he wanted.
official.
And he's talked about like a wide variety of things, but he has also spoken about the ingredients that are used in food in America.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at the list of approved ingredients that are kind of like non-food ingredients. I think is what they're confined as. I could be botching that, and that's sad because I work in the food industry. But in the U.S. in 1950, it was something like we had like 100 items on there, some nonsense. I don't actually know what the number is, and then it's ballooned to like 10,000.
Yeah.
And then in the EU, the number has stayed about the same. In Canada, it's stayed about the same. So it's not necessarily that like the EU or like the Canada or any of these countries are more progressive than the United States. It's more that there's clearly been, which is ironic that we have a billionaire as president saying this, but there's clearly been a lot of corporate capture of the American political system.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's the only way that that kind of stuff would happen. I mean, you just, and also we have a system where a lot of people don't know this, where you in the foods in the FDA's eyes, and a lot of the eyes of the regulatory agencies. I don't know about like private industry, but in the regulatory agency's eyes, you're innocent until proven guilty. In the
Yeah.
sense that like they can't delist it as a food additive until
Yeah, there's a major problem.
there has to be double blind study that shows that it's killing people, or harming them in some way. And so like no one's ever run like a double blind placebo controlled red 40 study that looks at like lifetime effective cancer, because let's be honest, that study would cost trillions of dollars, and that's
They
physically
don't.
impossible to do.
Yeah.
You have to research people for like 50 years,
Yeah.
and you'd have to kill some people because you'd have to be like, well, I'm feeding your ass red 40.
And nobody's gonna put the money into that because there's
Oh,
nothing to
and
gain
by the
from it.
way, you can't do that with animal studies. So you might come back to me if you're watching this and say like, oh, well, why not like a rat study or something on red 40?
Mm-hmm.
They've done that, and they've proven it's bad for rats. You could, we do lots of other things with medicine where it starts in the animal study and it goes to the human study. You just can't study the lifetime of a human when you are a human because
Yeah,
you're gonna die. So like it's one of those things
it's
where, I mean, if you
complicated.
look at the FDA and the way they approve drugs, and you also look at the way that they treat like food additives and a lot of other things, it is antiquated because they're going off of like really really hard science, when I think that in a system like this you can't do that when you're playing with things that involve like the lifespan of humans. It's the same problem with like aging medicine.
Yeah.
So like if I was to propose that aging is a disease and my medication solves that disease, the double-blind placebo-controlled study would be to look at like 50-year-olds and see how it impacts their lifespan, I guess. But then you're talking about like a study in which if success means that the study won't end.
Right.
So like it's too expensive. Not physically possible in our current regulatory environment. I don't know how much RFK will impact that kind of stuff because it goes all the way back to the food additives, where it's like they'll have to change the way the FDA looks at things, which hopefully, because the agencies, it's one of the things the Republicans were actually mad about. Originally, they weren't mad about it. They may have supported it. They changed their minds a lot, but today's Republican Party, headed by Donald Trump, they have identified the problem with agency capture, which is different than corporate capture, where you have and there was a Supreme Court ruling last year or the year before that kind of overturned a lot of this. But before that ruling, an agency could make laws. Well, they make
Mm-hmm.
rules, but the rules are treated as laws. And
Yeah.
they realized that, oh, wait, that means Congress isn't making laws anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's terrifying. And usually one party will, for some reason, point that kind of nonsense out and be like, we got to fix this. And the other party, for some odd reason, will say it's good because they can't agree on jack shit because that'd be too logical. Like I
So
don't.
going back to things like food dye and these things that, people have talked about being banned or people are upset that are in our ingredients but not in ingredients in other countries or they're banned in other countries. And you kind of touched on this a little, but do you think that it's no reflection of the American consumer? Like, do you think it's fully the fact that our corporations kind of control the rules and laws that are made? Or do you think the American
Is
consumer
that fault?
cares less and supports the corporations regardless of things like food dyes, whereas the European consumer wouldn't have or
I
wasn't?
I don't think either consumers care. I don't think the European consumer or the American consumer or the Canadian consumer cares. This is the
So, do
argument.
you think the European government and the agencies that set those requirements and banned certain things were not being influenced and affected by these corporations? Because, mind you, it's the same corporations.
Yeah, I don't think they were. I think for some reason the European and Canadian systems in that regard,
Hmm.
not every regard, but in that
The
regard,
political
yeah,
systems.
they're political and like specifically their agencies
Yeah.
because this isn't really the politics. This is like the deep state or like the fourth branch of government, like the administrative state. Um, we created it in order to protect us from stuff like this. And at the same time, you talk to a libertarian like me, I think the administrative state's trash. They do a terrible job of protecting the normal people, especially in America because it's a revolving door between Kellogg's and probably the FDA and or whoever they're getting regulated by. And they've got enough lobbyists in Washington to make sure that like really bad legislation doesn't get passed that would affect their cogs, and that's how they're looking at it. They're like
Yeah.
cost of goods sold problem. Like I imagine you might get a 1% increase if you have to switch to natural food dyes. And it's kind of messed up because it's like they can actually afford that. They just don't want to.
I mean, yeah,
Um,
we have switched a ton of things and we're a small company just to
but also
become
because
all
we're
natural.
good people. But when you get to a corporation of that size, there's actually a psychological term for it, but it's maybe you know the term. It's whenever you're part of a large organization, you stop taking agency for your decisions.
Hmm.
You start looking at it as the corporation, not as you,
Yeah.
and so that is inevitably a problem.
We're going to pause.
Hey, Kendall, what's up? If you call him and he wants to come up there, you can. That's totally fine with me.
Otherwise, just do
I
it
just wanted to make
sleeve by
sure like
sleeve.
they got off the truck and I told Rick like you can go sleeve by sleeve, whatever has to happen happens, but they just have to get off the truck or we can't work. Yeah, well, what if, yeah. What an
Well, you don't
asshole.
need help with
Yeah.
sleeve by
Okay.
sleeve,
Well,
though.
yeah, do whatever you need to get him off the truck. Thanks, man. Bye. And we're back after reading an ad. Okay,
No
anyways,
ads yet, but
no, there's no ads. What were we just talking about? So yeah,
the people at the corporations don't take responsibility
yeah,
for
they
that.
don't take responsibility. It gets diffused through the corporation. You'll see people commit horrific crimes that they would never commit in their personal life under the guise that they were acting under the direction of their corporation, when in
Right.
fact there was no one directing them, but they in their mind thought that like this is best for shareholders. And that's kind of where like B Corps and things like that have helped. You see
Yeah.
companies like us, or like one that I know and love is like Jenny's Ice Cream.
Mm-hmm.
Jenny's would never, they're certified B Corp, but they would never put trash in their products because
They care about the consumer
well, yeah, they just care about their country
and their
place they operate.
reputation
Yeah.
and their integrity. So, my question is, do you think it's the government's responsibility to ensure that its citizens are not making bad decisions for their health? Or do you think the consumers should be able to choose? Because hear me out. Red 40, there's some studies to show like it might cause some behavioral issues in children. Maybe somewhere down the line there's a link to a type of cancer. It's very hard to say with things like that. But we have other things that consumers in America, well, in America and Europe, across the world, can freely do that we know for a 100% fact are
Yeah.
killing them, like
Yeah.
cigarettes,
Yeah.
tobacco. They're like you
And
can
here's
you
the
can buy a
question.
pack of cigarettes in America anytime you want, down the street, at the store, anywhere.
Yeah.
It's not hard. There's no petition to ban them.
But
There's no.
okay, against your point, we in America have made a huge effort. I don't know about the rest of the world. I know in Europe they put like cancer pictures on the
Yeah.
cigarette packs, but here we've made an enormous effort to curb big tobacco's influence, in short of completely outright doing prohibition. I don't believe in prohibition of anything.
So you don't believe in banning Red 40?
No, so I'm a libertarian. You asked, like, do you
Yeah.
think the government should do it? And like the libertarian in me says, no. Like, people should get educated, get informed, make better decisions, and those corporations should suffer the consequence of losing sales.
Yeah.
On the flip side, the argument against me would be that those corporations now have so much power over the food system. It's very hard to find an alternative that's affordable,
Mm-hmm.
that may not have a food dye in it. And that is where the government needs to step in. That's very different than cigarettes. It's very, very different than alcohol. It's very, very different than almost anything. So if you have a system in which someone simply cannot get a hold of something that doesn't have food dye, and they don't have enough money to buy more expensive food, then
Yeah.
the government should, in theory, like solve that problem, because that's a broken free market. I mean, in a real free market, you would have a lot of competitors and a lot of like freedom of choice and
But you can't make
open
things
competition.
cost the same
Oh,
just because
no,
you want them
no, but
to.
I'm getting to that.
There is competition. There is cereal, fruity
Megan,
cereal that doesn't have artificial
Megan,
ingredients. Magic Spoon.
Megan, you work in the CPG
Magic
industry. You're
Spoon.
going to tell
It's
me that it's
$10
fair?
a box.
You're telling me it's fair? Is it fair?
In the
Is
terms
it
of an
fair?
American free market, yes.
No,
It
it's
is
not.
how it is supposed
There
to
are so
operate.
many grifters and gatekeepers in this industry that they prevent actively. I'm actually not going to name names. I was at a trade show for a certain distributor. I have a lot of respect for, and I would never say anything bad about them at all. And I don't think it's not me saying anything bad about them. This is what I'm saying, is that I was at this trade show, and they gave one of their like awards for like good supplier to like Procter and Gamble. It's not fair. It's not fair free market. That's some nonsense. A free market
What is that
operates.
award gonna get them though? It's like
That's no. It's not going to get them anything. It's a reflection of what's actually happening under the table, which is that Grocery stores charge slotting fees because they're under a lot of margin pressure, and
Hmm.
it's a good way for them to make money that is 100% margin, so it keeps them in business actually.
Yeah.
And without those slotting fees, it would be very, very hard for them to exist. And that may have come about because Walmart went to war with the grocery store and
Hmm.
drove prices down to the floor and has put a lot of people in a really, really tough spot. And in order to differentiate yourself, you either could sell a lot better food, which is why I recommend everybody going to their local independent grocery store because you will get good options
Yeah.
for hopefully decent prices. But if you go to
At
the
least
Walmarts of
similar
yeah, but if you go to the
prices.
Walmarts of the world, they've caused this like waterfall effect of competition where it was like Walmart got really, really big. They drove prices down across the board. They compressed margins for absolutely everybody. They had the most buying power, so they stayed profitable, but then other stores had to charge slotting fees. Slotting fees make it really, really hard for a small new startup brand to introduce innovation that's good for people. We just went over why a large corporation would not introduce innovation that was good for people. It's not good for the bottom line. It's
Yeah.
only really good for people. In a normal free market where all the brands had their own little like farmers market booth, no matter how big or small they were, you'd be surprised how things would actually change if there were no grocery stores or distributors or brokers or salespeople or grifters or their EDI software. Like, there's how many layers of friction are there between the brand or the food manufacturer, or don't even say the food manufacturer, the farmer, the person farming the food, because all this food comes from a farm. Even no baked comes from a farm. Someone farmed our cocoa beans for our chocolate chips. Somebody farmed the wheat out in like Colorado or Kansas. Somebody farmed the sugar cane. Somebody farmed
The vanilla.
the vanilla, the beans. Like, all of it is coming from a farmer. It's
Hmm.
getting processed at another manufacturing plant, sent to us in a usable format. We're then forming it into cookie dough, putting it in a jar. The jar should go right to the consumer, right? But there are more steps between me and the consumer than there are between me and the plant,
Yeah.
like the physical plant growing in the ground.
I do agree with you that the industry is kind of rigged in favor of the big people. However,
Yeah.
I don't think it makes sense for the American government to play a role in evening that out. I think it has to come from independent brands and manufacturers causing
Disruption.
disruption.
Yeah, I just the one
I don't
thing
have
that
a solution for that. We're not going to disrupt the way that like
yeah,
KeHE and UNFI operate necessarily.
well,
But
KE and Unify and Lapari and Cisco and US Foods and like all the major distributors, um, I think have done like a really, really good job of honestly making it more rigged in favor of the small brand.
yeah, I think they honestly right now I think they're kind of making an effort to highlight the small brand, which is great.
Well, they know that it's better for people, and I think I could be wrong about that. I think KE is a certified B Corp. I think KE operates with like same kind of like integrity that like Jenny's would. And from my experience with them, they have. I think that the problem is that the independent natural channel isn't exactly where you find the corruption.
Yeah.
You find it with the really big grocery stores, and it's not their fault. And again,
Yeah.
that's kind of my point, is that none of this is actually any one person's fault. And whenever that happens, the responsibility gets diffused across too many people, and then nobody makes a change. And that's actually why it takes an effort from government. But look, I'm a libertarian, like very libertarian. Like, I don't think people should ban or regulate anything. Um, but there are points where capitalism breaks down where you have to step in and regulate it. The problem is knowing how and why and when. And I think that's what our government's done a very poor job at over the last 50 years.
Mhm.
And they cause more problems than they start. A good example is minimum wage. This will get a lot of people angry. You should never raise the minimum wage. The average wage right now in America, I don't think anywhere is the minimum federal minimum wage. Anywhere.
No.
Which means that it's going to keep going
Definitely
up.
not.
It's going to keep going up regardless of raising the minimum. If you raise the minimum wage, you'll lower wages. It is a terrible freaking idea.
Yeah.
So, in the same regard, if you start banning all kinds of ingredients, carte blanche, like you're like, I don't want that ingredient, this one might be bad. We don't know.
Yeah.
That's bad. If you start banning food dyes, I'm like, dude, what's that gonna do? Like, that's kind of my point. Is
Yeah.
that like if the government steps in and bans Red 40, who cares? You just anyone clamoring for Red 40 in their mouth? Nobody.
No, I
Nobody wants red
mean,
40 in their mouth. So
yeah,
like if that's the case, then like dude, nobody cares. Like if you need red velvet cake, like we'll use some red beetroot dye and like it doesn't taste like anything. It's just like red 40, but
yeah.
it's natural. America can move on and the economic impact will be so low and so easy that it's actually disgusting that we haven't banned it and that's why people are upset. I
Yeah.
think that's why those moms have a point. A really big point. Like they're not asking you to ban sugar. They're not asking you to ban like crazy stuff. They're not banning vaccines. All they're asking for is like, hey, here's this ingredient that literally no one needs. And I mean, literally nobody.
I think
And
the
also, the companies that make Red 40, you know what else they make it for? This and that
yeah.
and Santa right
I think
here.
the issue with Americans, which as a self-proclaimed libertarian, I'm sure you understand, the issue with Americans is that when you say we're going to ban this, their minds automatically go to the next thing. Like, oh, they're banning Red 40. They are going to ban
Okay, yeah,
sugar.
and
Like,
that's
oh
the
no,
worst
I'm not
freaking
going to get to
habit that we
drink
have.
Coca-Cola anymore. Like,
It's the worst habit we have as a nation. And this is my
no
big
matter
problem.
how specific you are in America, the public always views it as like a slope. You know, you're slipping down the slope.
That's been caused by both parties speaking their
Yes,
bullshit.
both parties on different issues. Like it goes
I
across
can
the
name
board.
the two issues that
I'm
I
saying it's
am
an
thinking of.
American
Can you
thing,
name the
though.
two issues that you're thinking of?
With the right, I automatically think about banning assault
What's
rifles.
the other one?
On the left,
Yep. You
uh,
know what it is.
is it abortion?
Yeah.
That's not really.
It's always a slippery slope, guys.
That's
We're
not
going to be living in
really.
the Handmaid's Tale soon. And soon they'll take away all our guns. They'll come into your house. The blue hats, the blue helmets will come into your house. They're coming.
Anyway, so my point is, I think that's why we have trouble banning, specific things like artificial food dyes. At the same time, I personally have similar views as you, where I don't really think it's the government's responsibility to ban things for
It's
the
a
general public.
responsibility, though, to fix capitalism because capitalism can get off track. And by the way, the only reason it gets off track.
But you could do things like give subsidies or manufacturing grants to companies who are producing better for you products. Like
Yeah,
there's ways to
I think
help
that's
those
getting. I
people.
think that's getting too involved.
My point is that
Yeah.
we like for example, us at No Baked, I always tell people this, like the only times I have changed the product or, you know, how I come up with new flavors, et cetera, it's always through customer feedback. And
Mm.
so when I see this trend out there where people don't want to eat a product that has artificial flavors and artificial food dyes, I, as the owner of an independent food brand, look at our products and I say, okay,
Let's get rid
we've
of the
already
guys.
eliminated, artificial flavors from everything. We don't use those typically anyway. But in some of our SKUs that we sell online directly to consumers, we use food dyes, typical ones.
Yeah.
And so we recently have made the effort to switch because I'm like, I want to be on the right side of things. Like I want to offer a fully natural cookie dough. It's cookie dough. We have very simple, straightforward, natural ingredients. There's no reason that I need to use the red and the blue colors that we do for those two
Yeah.
flavors. So I think the responsibility lies on two people. One, the independent brands who are making products right now. Two, consumers.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's a consumer's responsibility to, if they care, buy the products from the independent brands that are trying to make a difference. I buy Magic Spoon.
That's fair.
I like it. I think it tastes good as the other cereals, but I know that it's better. And so I don't buy other cereals. I don't feed it to my kids, other ones, just
But I
Magic
mean,
Spoon.
the flip side to what you just said is Magic Spoon is, I think, 3 times as much as a box of cereal by weight.
Yeah.
It's probably a 300% increase in costs.
We don't feed our
I
kids
don't think
much
you have to
cereal
be.
because
Well,
it's more
yeah,
expensive. That's a
that's true.
consumer
Okay,
choice to try to support the better options.
I could say something that'll really upset people.
Do you want to do that?
Yeah, I do. So if you want to buy more expensive food, you could eat less. And considering America has a calorie consumption problem, you could probably do with eating less. You fat sacks of God. I mean, it's sad.
Okay, but something that's not very expensive that you can also eat and snack on is fruit and vegetables.
Fruit and
Like, you don't have
vegetables.
to buy raspberries for every snack.
Yeah,
Buy
berries.
carrots.
Berries are the only expensive
Our kids love eating
garden item.
carrots and they're not expensive.
Yeah,
So there's always alternatives to packaged food.
dude, bananas are huge. I
Bananas
don't
are
see.
so cheap.
They've always been cheap
So cheap.
for someone that like is.
People love them.
There's a
Kids love
lot.
them. You can put them in smoothies. You can put them on top of things.
They're
I
cheap.
mean,
They're actually calorically dense too. So it's not like
yeah.
you're getting like this thing that like won't satisfy you. And also, it doesn't even need to be calorically dense because it's huge. I mean, that's the other thing. Like, have you ever seen the Instagram memes where it's like, like a bunch of natural food, like whole foods, and then like a processed meal? Like usually it'll be like Starbucks, like latte, like breakfast sandwich, and then like 3 meals of vegetables and meat,
Yes.
like 3 meals worth, like a whole, like 3 plates.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, like what actually is happening is you guys are just like gorging yourselves on fat,
Yeah.
like processed fat, like seed
Right.
oils and whatnot. And by the way, like seed oils, I don't know if they're bad or good or not. I'm going to assume that they're not great. What I will say is that it may just be the fact that there's so many calories in a seed oil that that's actually the problem. People want to like overcomplicate everything when really it's like, no, I mean, if you think you're eating less calories, but then you just happen to cook everything in like seed oils, or like, you're going out to eat and they're cooking everything in seed oils, that
Yeah.
oil gets in your food.
You're still getting
And then
the
you're getting an
calories.
extra, 800,000 calories a day. It's a
Yeah.
shitload. It's a lot. Most people, I mean, if you're the size of me and you're extremely active, dude, I mean, if you eat more than the 3,000 calories a day, you're just kind of effed. Like you're gonna get fat and you're screwed. And like it's very easy to do in our modern society to eat that much if you touch processed food at all. Like if you touched, I would love anyone to like look at your favorite snack from the grocery store. I mean, I really like Dots pretzels a lot, and they have this like churro flavor that you can pick up at like the gas station.
Mm-hmm.
And you buy Dots pretzels and you think like, well, I'm getting like this thing that's not like, it's not that gross. Like it's not sugar. There's sugar in churro, but like it's not horrible. That bag of pretzels is a tiny bag. It's a tiny like Dots pretzels bag. It's got like 1,000 calories in it.
Wow.
And I could eat that bag like 5 times, like easy eat that bag 5 times. And then if you came to me and said, Jimmy, I want you to eat that many calories worth of like kale, I'd be like, oh, well, I'll die. Like before I could eat the kale, like I'll literally explode. There's so much kale. So like there is a thing that you're choosing to do when you choose the types of food you eat that I think would offset the cost increase, where it's like maybe you should just be eating less, period.
Yeah.
And then like, and by the way, I'm
I
saying that
think
as someone that
just
sells food.
swapping out certain snacks. It's like instead of buying your kid the expensive packaged snack that's a little better for you, like cut up some bananas. It's a little cheaper
Yeah.
and they're still getting food.
Yeah.
So it's just decisions that the consumer has to make, and I think that's what it boils down to.
It is. And also I've said this before to like even investors and no baked and people that have like believed in me and Megan. And even recently actually someone that we borrowed money from. So like we did like a private debt deal, and one of the lead investors on a call with me asks, so like, but are you guys like really bullish on like, people coming back, like returning and like buying more and more cookie dough? And I was like, yeah, sure, man. But like, I want people to buy it like once a month.
Yeah.
What am I like? I'm not attempting.
It doesn't need to be a
fat.
weekly purchase.
Yeah, I was like, dude, I mean,
but have a jar in your fridge and eat a little at a time. Like that's our
I think
goal.
There's 100.
It's a sweet snack.
Yes, and I think there's 150 million households in America. If I'm sorry, but if I sold 150 million jars, one a year to every person, I'd be perfectly happy.
Right.
I'm not looking for like growth to the moon because I shoved calories down everyone's throat until they exploded. Like that's part of what's wrong with America's food system. Like capitalism went off the rails in certain industries. By the way, the industries where it went the most off the rails are the ones that got interfered with the most by the government. Mm-hmm. So like if you look at the more regulated a industry is, which food should be regulated, but it ended up becoming more and more regulated over time. it allows for a lot of corporate capture, a lot of regulatory capture, a lot of like blocking, creating barriers and creating
Yes.
friction. And then that leads to a few winners, usually a duopoly, and food is
Yeah, and we don't want that.
well, yeah, but also what it does is it leads to the current situation where you have something that should change, but the five guys that own 80% of the grocery store are like, I don't feel like it.
Yeah, they're like, nah.
Yeah, the CEO, and by the way, the CEO of Kellogg's is a clown. He's the guy that went on CNBC and said, "Feed breakfast to your family for dinner," like cereal or some shit. And I was like, dude, that
Yeah.
guy,
I do remember that.
that guy
He
is
was
an
like, yeah,
idiot.
eat cereal for dinner instead.
I also
You'll
want to know
save
how he
money.
got how do you get that job? Like sometimes I think about this. This is a new topic. This is fun. I love this. So I was on the phone with my brother, and he was like, "Yeah, man, we were in talks with this company. He works for a fintech company that like they finance the leasing of different like small goods, kind of like Klarna." And he
Mhm.
was like, "So we were in this talks with this furniture company, multi-billion-dollar furniture company. Can't remember the name. They went bankrupt this summer.
Mm.
Right before they went bankrupt, they
That's
contacted my
every
brothers.
furniture company
Yeah, well,
ever,
they
for the record.
contacted Alex Company right before that and said, "Can you lease shit to us, like our customers?" And they said, "Sure, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like the volume's there, we're gonna make money, cool." And like they do approval, they basically attempt to approve people that don't get approved by the primary lender.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way those furniture companies. If you ever walk in, try to get financing, maybe you have, maybe you haven't when you were poor, because usually you're poor when you're doing that, financing like a couch or a TV. They make sure you get approved. The interest
Yeah.
rate's gonna be fucked up.
My God, I think these chairs are financed.
Well, yeah, but these are
Right
financed
now.
cheap. This is on like a Wells Fargo credit card.
Yeah,
I'm not
really
talking
is.
about that. I'm not talking about like you got 0% interest on a chair. I'm talking about like the chair cost $300. You needed to finance it because you didn't have $300,
Yeah.
and the chair is going to cost you $500,000. The financing partner's winning. Anyways, they find out later because the CFO of that company is just trying to ram this thing through, like build us the portal, let's get this thing going. They find out later, like they just couldn't figure out how to turn a profit. And I don't really know how you do this with as much revenue as that company had, but they just went completely upside down. They were going to file bankruptcy. They contacted their firm and they turned everything off.
Mm-hmm.
But they were like, wow, that's crazy. And then I looked at Alec and I was like, but that guy was the CFO of a public company. And you're telling me that like he was doing all this goofy shit, right? Like oh, I'm trying to go find like a leasing partner so I can get extra money.
Yeah.
Like I've seen small business owners do this where they're like, I gotta borrow from like wherever I can borrow
Yeah.
from as fast as I can. And so like I see this happening in real life, and I was just like, how much money does he make?
Oh my God.
Because it's a public company. I was like, I wonder how much money that clown makes. Like the guy that was the CFO. Like
Yeah.
I was like, do you know? And Alec was like, oh shit, we can look it up. And so we're on the phone, and he looks it up, and he's like, dude, this guy's making like $3 million a year.
Are you serious? That is so ridiculous.
And I was just like, hire me, bro. I'll get you. I would have made sure you didn't go bankrupt.
For $1 million a year, yeah.
Yeah, it's a company that had $5 billion in revenue, by the way, and like tons of stores, and like actually was the economics were like pretty good.
Yeah.
They the reason they went bankrupt was because their debt was so large. They got liquidated, by the way. The Chapter 11 didn't work, and this is why.
Wow.
The debt was so large and so massive that they said there's absolutely no way to refinance it.
That is insane.
So over time, somebody kept borrowing money, which would be the CFO. Like,
yeah,
they kept being like, we should borrow more. This is a situation where it's like, okay, no big. I don't know how much debt we have, but it's gonna be public soon. But I'm pretty sure we have like $500,000, $600,000 in debt, probably like long-term, short-term credit cards, all this stuff. Our revenue is at least like 5 times that. So like, you know, it's like pretty normal. Like it's not like horrible. When it gets to a point where like your revenue's $5 billion, but you owe like $30 billion.
Yeah, there's a big problem.
It's like, dog,
there's
what did you
problem.
do? And you got paid $3 million a year to do that? Hook me up, dude. Sign me up. I will indebt your company and bankrupt it all day long.
Yeah, for much less than that. I mean,
and that goes back to the Kellogg CEO, where I see this clown make clown statements on TV.